You have been told that respect is granted to the loudest person in the room, the one who wins by force of volume and certainty. I will test that belief against something quieter and more durable. If you stay with me to the end, you will leave with a handful of sentences so clean and disciplined that they can reset a room in seconds, and we will prove an unsettling claim. The calmest nervous system usually governs the meeting. I will leave a door half open now. There is one line in particular that can invert a heated room without a raised voice, and we will arrive at it only after we have earned it. Before we set sail, a simple, humane caution. Everything you hear is for learning, not for diagnosis or command. I do not know your history or your obligations, and a video is not a physician, nor a lawyer, nor the person who must live with your choices. Treat what follows as craft guidance from a working philosopher who studies the ancients and practices with fallible modern lungs. The responsibility for action is yours. The responsibility for clarity I will share with you. We begin with a common confusion. Many of us think respect is a prize someone else gives us when we finally do enough. The Stoics did not talk like this. They spoke of character as architecture, not decoration. You do not hang a banner of respect over a shaky frame. You pour a foundation of self-command that can carry weight. Marcus Aurelius, who spent many nights writing to himself in a war tent, keeps reminding us to ask, what is in my control and what is not? Not because he wanted to shrink responsibility, but because he wanted to focus power. You cannot force another mind to admire you. You can, however, train your judgment, your posture, your phrasing, your breath. In a storm, the sailor does not lecture the wind. He trims the sail, sets the angle, finds the line of travel that honors the conditions. Respect works like that. It is not begged, it is built. Then sensed by others the way we sense a well-made bridge beneath our feet. Let me place you in a room you know. There is a table, there is a deadline, there is a person across from you who believes certainty is courage and volume is proof. They are sure they must dominate because they do not yet trust their ideas to stand on their own. And you, if you are untrained, will feel your chest tighten and your speech quicken because the body mirrors what it faces. A Stoic sees that reflex and names it the way an engineer names load, torque, stress. Nothing mystical, just measurable forces in a human frame. Slow the breath by one beat. Allow the eyes to steady. Accept that the goal is not to win, but to remain aligned with what is true and within your command. From that stance, language changes. We move from reactions to choices, and once we have choices, we can select sentences that carry the architecture of respect within them. There is a sentence you will use often if you practice this craft. It sounds like this: I hear what you're saying, and I hold a different conclusion. That arrangement does three things. It demonstrates that attention has been paid, it refuses to outsource judgment, and it declines the invitation to hostility. Notice the verbs: hear, hold, conclude. They are verbs of the inner citadel. To borrow a Stoic image, the core of you that does not hand its sovereignty to noise. You will not always be rewarded for such a line in the moment. Some people become more agitated when they realize you will not play the familiar game of push and push back. But something subtle shifts in the room. You exit the binary of agree or attack, and you enter the third path the Stoics defended, the path of self-governance in the middle of other storms. The ancients did not sit in fluorescent conference rooms or worry about reply all emails, but their nerves were the same fiber as ours, and their political rooms were far more dangerous. Seneca wrote long letters to a friend about anger, calling it a kind of temporary madness, the fire that burns its own house to scare the neighbors. Epictetus, who had been enslaved and later taught freely, returned to the same theme in 100 angles. You can't dictate the world, but you can dictate your stance. One reason the modern world misreads Stoicism is that it mistakes calm for passivity. Calm is not surrender. It is the stable platform from which decisive action can be chosen rather than reflexively fired. When we talk about respect, we are really talking about signal and noise, about how to send a signal that keeps its shape even when the air is turbulent. I promised stories because principles breathe best when they have faces. Here is the first, a preventable downfall. A rising manager, we will call Elena, built her reputation on speed, quick answers, quick pivots, quick defenses when challenged. In her 3rd year, she was asked to lead a project review in a room of older executives. The meeting turned when one executive skewered a slide with a tone half sneer, half question. Elena's pulse spiked and the practiced pattern activated, match force with force. She answered fast, then faster, until the room saw 2 people in a duel and forgot the work itself. After the meeting, the feedback did not mention her technical strength at all. It referred to defensiveness, combative stance, difficulty integrating critique. She told me later that the work had been solid and the critique partly performative, and she was probably right. The tragedy is that she allowed someone else to set the climate. She ceded the helm. We rebuilt her approach the way you rebuild a training habit. First, the breath. 2 counts longer on the exhale than on the inhale during challenge, because a parasympathetic signal is worth 5 IQ points in the moment. Second, the posture. Shoulders back and down, chin neutral, because a hunch is a body's vote for retreat. Third, the language. Lead with acknowledgement, pivot to autonomy, end with calm conviction. The next month, she faced a similar performance. She looked down once to buy a beat of time, then said, with no ice and no apology, "I've listened carefully, and I interpret the data differently. I propose we walk the assumptions behind the model one by one before we choose an action." A hush followed the sentence, not because it was theatrical, but because it was structurally sound. Attention paid, autonomy preserved, process invited. In 6 months, her reputation changed. You can track this change on a spreadsheet. Fewer email chains spiraling into flames, more decisions made in the room, less rumination afterward. We had not chased the executive's respect. We had made a person they could respect. The second story is a delayed awakening. A teacher named Ravi prided himself on being chill. He never called out rude jokes in the staff room, never challenged a colleague who undermined him in front of students, never said no when his time was treated as infinitely expandable. He called it Stoic calm. But this was not Stoicism. It was avoidance dressed as tolerance. The Stoics did not advise swallowing whatever is served. They advised responding according to nature. There is nothing natural in allowing yourself to become a doormat and then congratulating yourself and not exploding. That is still anger. It just flows inward and corrodes from the inside. We practiced with Ravi a sentence that is short, soft, and immovable. That doesn't sit right with me. Call it a stone placed gently in the path of a rolling wheel. The first time he used it was over a joke aimed at a shy student. He looked at the colleague and offered the line evenly. He did not lecture, did not moralize, did not perform offense. The air cooled. The colleague mumbled something and moved on. Later, 3 other teachers took Ravi aside to thank him. They had felt the same discomfort and lacked a clean tool. The human lesson here is quiet but large. Your boundary can teach other people how to form theirs. And again, you do not seize respect. You display self-respect, and others adjust the way they interact with you. Our third story is a transformation that takes time. A contractor, call her Maya, oversaw crews with narrow margins and tighter calendars. Arguments flared often because the site had too many dependencies and too many egos. She had learned the habit of standing her ground by standing louder. It worked on some, and it ruined her voice in sleep. We introduced what I will call the respectful pause. When a conversation becomes a contest rather than a collaboration, you mark it, not with sarcasm or exit lines that humiliate, but with a clear frame. We can continue when we can speak to each other like partners. Then you stop. You might switch to a written follow-up. You might propose a time later. You might delegate. The point is that you no longer bargain with disrespect. Maya used it on a Friday when a subcontractor already behind met her scheduling constraints with contempt. She did not counter contempt with contempt. She said evenly, "I'll rejoin this when we can treat each other as allies solving the same problem. I'm stepping away for now. I'll send a brief with the options." The fury fizzled because the oxygen had been removed. Monday morning, the subcontractor arrived with fewer theatrics. A week later, the site's gossip called Maya cold. She smiled because she was not cold. She was warm to the work and cool to the noise. There is a difference, and your nerves can learn it like any sport. These stories are not miracles. They are practice. Let us go deeper into the mechanics because Stoicism is a hands-on philosophy. The central distinction is always the same: the world outside you and the world within you. Respect, if we define it soberly, is a pattern of interaction in which others take your stance seriously enough to shape their own behavior around it. You cannot decree that pattern. You can invite it by making your stance legible and consistent. Language is one tool for legibility. Tone and timing are others. Consider timing. A pause of 1.5 seconds after you hear something provocative is not silence. It is punctuation. It tells everyone involved that you are the sort of person who lets ideas reach the part of the brain that can evaluate them. The pause is a proof of concept. If you build that habit, your words will arrive with a halo of credibility the way a carefully landed plane has a silence in its wake. A modern temptation is to treat phrases as spells. Say the magic words, and the door opens. Stoicism resists that fantasy. What matters is not secret language, but the alignment between words, posture, and mind. You can say, "I hear you," and still radiate contempt. People pick up the mismatch and respect shrinks because we are social animals equipped with astonishing pattern detectors. Thus, before you touch the sentence, adjust the frame. What outcome am I seeking that I can actually influence? If the answer is to humiliate them or to win, you are already off the Stoic road. If the answer is to state my perspective with dignity and to invite a rational process, you are on firmer ground, and the words will fit the purpose. Let's correct a few common oversimplifications. Stoicism is not detachment from feeling. It is disciplined friendship with feeling. The Stoics used words like assent and impression to describe the way a thought arrives and the authority we either give it or don't. That irritation you felt when someone dismissed you is an impression. You are free to assent, to crown it king, to let it drive, or you are free to notice it and ask whether it serves your aim. None of this denies the reality of hurt, fatigue, or injustice. It simply says, if you hand your steering wheel to those, you will crash more often and make less of a difference than you could have. Stoic practice is not the removal of emotion. It is the installation of a pilot who knows which instruments to trust. Because we promised rigor, let's name sources. When I appeal to the inner citadel, I am lifting an image from later commentators describing a theme in Marcus's private notes, a protected core you can return to for orientation when the outside shakes. When I speak of control and response, I am in Epictetus's school, where the first distinction students learn is between what is up to us and what is not. When I caution about the madness of anger, I am in Seneca's study, where he dissects anger's false rewards and real costs. I am also aware that all three lived in a world of hierarchy and harshness we rightly reject. The recovery of Stoicism in our time is a translation effort. The text remains. We owe it a modern syntax. We bring labor law and psychology and the science of stress to the table, and we remove any odor of fatalism. A Stoic is not a slave to fate. A Stoic is a student of cause and effect, who looks for the lever that exists in every situation, even when it is only the self. Where does this leave us with respect? It leaves us with the craft of boundary. A boundary is a statement of what you will do and will not do, in language that does not require the other person to agree with you to be true. Notice the quiet power of that definition. If your boundary depends on their permission, it is not a boundary. It is a plea. A sentence like "I'm ending this conversation for now, and we can revisit it when we're both ready to speak with care," does not ask for a vote. It reports a choice. In relationships, this is oxygen. Love without edges suffocates because resentment seeps in where clarity is absent. At work, the same applies. Teams without boundaries become noise factories. The most respected teammate is not the one who accommodates every ask. It is the one whose yes means yes because their no is real. There is a small line I promised at the beginning, the one that can invert a room. It lives at the intersection of courage and courtesy. When a discussion turns into a rush for dominance, you can say gently and firmly, "I want to have this conversation, and I will return to it when we can do it with respect." Then you stop. You do not leave in a huff. You leave like a surgeon washing hands, without drama, because the next task also matters. The magic here, if we can use that word loosely, is that you refuse the premise that the only choices are to keep fighting or to submit. You create a third space and step into it. Some people will follow you there immediately. Some never will. The room, however, will remember that someone demonstrated another way to be an adult. You might ask, won't this be abused by those who weaponize respect to avoid hard feedback? Of course, that risk exists. That is why Stoic guidance is never absolutist. Use the sentence in good faith. Don't use it as a shield against accountability. To prevent that drift, pair your boundaries with transparency. Say, for instance, "I will put my critique in writing by noon, so we have a concrete basis for the next round. Or, if I have misread your intent, I'm open to correction. My line is about tone, not substance. That kind of accompanying detail prevents a noble practice from becoming a convenient escape. Let me fold in a different arena where this matters, the online world, where the currency is attention and the product is outrage. A brief phrase like, "I appreciate your perspective. I've come to a different one," can end a thread before it devours your afternoon. The Stoic reason is simple. There are more conversations available than a human life can hold. If you were building a house, you would not pour concrete into every open hole you see on a walk. You would pour it where there is a plan. Treat your time and your attention as the finite building materials they are. People who respect themselves manage those materials with care. Others come to respect them because their interactions become predictable, fair, and clean. We still have an open loop to close, one I have deliberately walked around. What about those moments when silence or disengagement would itself be a failure of virtue? The Stoic answer is not retreat. It is disciplined engagement. When harm is being done and you are in position to reduce it, the most respectful thing you can do is speak with clarity, the thing that must be said, without contempt. The set of sentences we have discussed do not forbid honest confrontation. They equip it. I see it differently, and here is why. I cannot support that approach because it compromises our values, and I'm committed to a better way. Let's enumerate the facts before we pick a narrative. These are not exit lines. They are the structure that lets truth get a hearing. Combine them with evidence, and your voice becomes not merely heard, but trusted. There is a final story worth telling because it shows the slow joy of this work. A young engineer named Sora kept a notebook. On the left page each day, she wrote situations that had pulled her off center. On the right, she drafted a sentence she wished she had said. Over months, a pattern emerged. She was most efficient and most respected in meetings where she had prepared a few lines that would keep her inside her values. Her favorites were always the same shape: acknowledgement, autonomy, invitation. I see what you're emphasizing. My analysis led me elsewhere. Let's walk through the model together. She found that when she used this form, a quiet gift appeared. She liked herself better after the meeting. That became the compass. Respect was no longer a prize. It was a byproduct of living coherently. 6 quarters later, a new hire asked her how she had become the adult in the room. She laughed because she still felt chaotic inside some days, but she opened the battered notebook and told the truth. Nothing fancy, just practice. If you want a method to begin today, keep it modest and real. Select one conversation. Before you enter it, write a single sentence that you will use if the tone tips into heat. I want this to be productive. Let's slow down and make sure we're hearing each other. Practice it once out loud, not for theatrics, but so your mouth knows the path. Enter the room with the body prepared to support the words. Breath low, shoulders released, eyes kind. Use it if needed. If not needed, keep it in your pocket the way a climber carries a spare carabiner. Most climbs do not require it, and the climb where you reach for it, you will be grateful it is there. After the conversation, review the tape in your mind, not to punish yourself, but to learn. If you lost your temper, mark the minute, find the trigger, adjust next time. This is training, not scorekeeping. A Stoic is a student without end. Let me revisit the hook and prove the claim. The calmest nervous system usually governs the meeting because human beings co-regulate. We borrow states from each other. If one person offers a stable rhythm, measured breath, measured phrases, measured pauses, the rest of the bodies in the room tend to match that rhythm. This is why a leader who cannot control his own voice ends up controlling nothing. The converse is also true. The quiet person who sits like a strong tree can become the reference point, even without rank. People will begin to take their cues from you almost against their will. They will slow down to be understood by you. Respect, then, becomes less a metal and more a harmonics problem. Which note stabilizes the chord? Some viewers will wonder whether this is all just etiquette with Greek footnotes. I sympathize with the suspicion. Etiquette is a surface polishing, Stoicism is structural carpentry. Politeness can hide cowardice. Stoic speech is not a disguise. It is the exterior of an interior choice. I will not let the worst voice in the room decide who I am. When Marcus reminds himself to stop arguing about what a good person should be and simply be one, he is instructing his hands, not our ears. Words matter because they guide hands. A boundary line in the mouth becomes a boundary line in the calendar. I won't respond to work emails after 9 becomes, I put the phone in the drawer at 8. A respectful pause in the meeting becomes a careful plan on paper. This kind of integration is what earns durable respect. People may dislike your decisions. They will have a harder time dismissing your coherence. We should say something about fear because it is the silent co-author of many conversations. The fear is often a child of two parents, the fear of being disliked and the fear of being wrong. Stoicism has ways to talk to both. If they dislike you for your boundary, the philosophy says, ask whether you could have delivered it with more grace. If yes, improve the delivery. If no, accept the dislike as the price of living by a compass. That price is often lower than you think. As for being wrong, welcome correction like a builder welcomes a level. There is no insult in learning that your wall leans. The insult is in pretending it does not. A sentence like, you may be right. Here is the evidence that led me here. Show me stronger evidence and I will move is not weakness. It is strength with open hands. People trust those hands. Now we circle to a final micro-summary because memory loves compression. You cannot command respect as a demand. You can conduct yourself with self-respect, and others will adjust. You cannot control the weather of other people's moods. You can be the sailor who uses the wind that is given. You cannot force a room to be rational. You can become the person whose sentences are rational enough to make the room want to meet them halfway. The toolkit is not mystical. Acknowledgments that prove you listened, disagreements stated without acid, boundaries drawn without drama, pauses long enough for thought to arrive, and exits that are not flounces, but firm steps toward a better time to speak. I have tried to keep the tone warm because this is not a cold life. Stoicism can sound severe if we only read its Latin bones. In the body, it is compassion with a spine. It knows that people lash out because they are tired or scared. It knows we have done the same. It refuses to indulge harm while keeping the door open for return. There is a way to tell someone, that line crossed my values, and I won't continue down it, while making it clear that you still recognize their humanity. There is a way to say, I respect your right to hold that view. I walk another path without making the other path into an enemy. This is the grown elegance our time is hungry for. When we part, I want you to feel not the pressure to be perfect, but the permission to practice. The engineer in you will understand this immediately. We prototype a behavior, we test it under load, we refine. The sailor in you will understand this too. We do not outrun every storm. We learn where to put the bow. Try one sentence this week. Only one. Use it once. See what changes within you first, then around you. If you want a next chapter, we can travel there together. How to build a rehearsal habit for composure with breathing patterns, postural cues, and a handful of short drills so your calm does not depend on luck. That work does not glitter, and it is the work that makes you trustworthy. The hook at the start raised a claim and a promise. The claim was that the calmest nervous system usually governs the meeting. The promise was a handful of clean sentences that could reset a room. Both stand, I think, not because you must believe me, but because you can test them. Try the line that pauses the fire and invites respect back into the room. Try the line that acknowledges and disagrees without surrender. Try the line that ends an exchange when dignity is at risk. Watch what happens to the architecture of your days when you speak from a foundation you poured yourself. One day, without quite noticing, you will realize that you are no longer chasing respect. You are building, brick by careful brick, a life that others cannot help but respect because it holds. If you choose to keep walking, the path ahead is clear. We will look at training attention the way an athlete trains balance, at how to keep your center when provoked, and at how to be both gentle and exacting with yourself. Consider this not a sign-off, but a turning of the page. The next chapter begins where you are. In the very next conversation you enter, with a breath that is a fraction slower than the one before, and a sentence in your pocket shaped by care.